All right, week 2 in CIT85, HTML, and CSS. And I'm recording this at the week before the semester starts. And the reason I say that is that my goal is always to give you 2 weeks of course available for you to work on. Okay? I do, and I talked about late work in this class, but the reason I give you 2 weeks ahead is that I love it when students work ahead. I hope they love it when they do because they can feel a sense of relief. I was actually listening to something the other day talking about why we procrastinate. And if you've taken my 82 class, you know I post a little bit of content about, being focused, what it takes to be focused, really trying not to procrastinate. And part of the reason I do this is to encourage everyone. And there are specifically generally a group of students who do work ahead. Because there's a benefit to me, is like the more you work ahead, the less I have to grade that morning after the due date. Again, your job is not to make my job easier. It just gives you also, more importantly, and I talked about this already, time to fix something if you missed it. Okay, so here are the list of things I want to go over in this attendance, which is first markdown files. Again, for those of you that haven't taken my 93 or my 85, you might not know what markdown files are. We, by default, had them created when we created repos. But if you don't know what they are, they're basically, we're learning markup, and markdown is basically a smaller set of tags that's used for creating markdown files that are generally documentation files. And here's a guide for what the syntax looks like. Just to tell you, I'm going to move over to my editor real quick. Like, here's the default file that was created. But you can also, inside of here, and I think this is actually a good idea, is to create a markdown file. And then every week, and I'm about to go over this, as we copy into the next week, you can keep adding to that markdown file. Because oftentimes, if you have a really good documentation file, it'll allow you, instead of having to go back and rewatch something, which is not a problem, but it may allow you to quickly access something to remind yourself what that is. There may be times I will require them, but in general, I just say they're probably a good idea. So if I was to create a markdown file here, remember what's key is when you're creating files, and this is a preview for the next item, is to be in the folder you want, and then create a file, and then readme.md, or you could call it whatever you want. Readme.md, readme is kind of a standard one. You could also say my notes.md, right? You could call it whatever you want. But I'm just going to put one here just so we see it. Because remember, there's one now inside this folder, and there's one for all of my private. Now, I only have my private repo open because that's generally the work you're going to start with this week. So when you're in here, this is when you can look at this link that I've given you for Markdown, and come over here and look at, like, if I wanted a heading, I would use that. If I wanted a heading 1 through 6. So where we've learned to write H1s and H2s, right, you can have Markdown. Less markup, Markdown. And this will go through and show you best practices, line breaks, how to do that, emphasis, bolds, links, italics. Links will be down here in the bottom. Quotes. I mean, there's just all kinds of ways. And trust me, if you're in this area, you'll be introduced to right now and in the future Markdown and how to read. And of course, reading them is pretty easy. Writing them is also pretty easy, but it's just good to know the basics. Like, here's again, we were learning OLs and ULs and LIs and all those things in this class, but look how quickly, right? This is the HTML equivalent. All you have to do in Markdown is this. So simple. Might make you wonder why we're not doing it. Well, probably because it's not as flexible. Okay, so that's the first item. So for this week, you're taking, and this is kind of my little preview when I started talking, you're going to create a new folder, w2_html, and your private repo. Now, when you're doing this, be cautious, right? of where your current folder is and are your current selections. So this little bar that you see highlighted in my editor here, that's what is active. And if I come up and create a folder, now it's going to create it within this directory, which is not what I want. And sometimes it's not clear about if I want to create one in the root, in a root I talked about last week. But if I want to do that, when I click here, that whole thing rolls up. So one way you can do it is actually by clicking that README file. And now why have I done that here? Let me just go back. The reason I've done that is now when I create a folder, it creates it at that same level. And that's what I mean in the instruction when I say create a new folder. And I already have mine here, but w2_html. And then take, right? So I've already done it, but then you take that code from W2 and you copy it into W3. Now, sorry, from W1 into W2. I've already copied mine and, of course, coded, so mine will look differently, but I'm just giving you the idea. Okay? So that's what these two lines mean. Hopefully that visual helps you. This week in your code along, I talk about in the instruction. Okay, so I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to open up a new tab. I'm going to go into the instruction, and there's an hour and a half of code along, which I know when you hear that, it'd be like, oh, that's a long time. It depends on you, right, and what your schedule's like, but generally I try to do this, which is I give a break. Okay, breaks are important. They are optional, but it is important to understand the way they work in this class. And I talk about them in the video that covers this week's code along. But I just want to give you this heads up, right? That, look through that whole file. Again, I'll have covered it, but, set yourself up for success in this case, because I know for me, I need those breaks. They are helpful to me to actually be able to say, you know what, I need a break. And you know what, here's when I often take a break, is when I start making dumb errors. I'm like, oh, I need to take a break. Okay. Now, in this code along you're about to do for the first item for this week, Dave actually says, go get the images off his GitHub. And if you've never done this, this could be a little bit of a mystery. So I want to demystify this. So I've talked about this in one of the videos, but in Dave's one video that we're going through, he gives a link down here to his GitHub, right? And so I've talked about this, but if you come down here, I think on like week 6 or lesson 6, remember, we're not creating the structure, we're creating a different structure, but the images is here. Like if I wanted to take this image right here, I would, if I right clicked, I think there's 2 ways we could do this. Because if I click on it, right, then it shows me the image, and I think the better way to do this is right click, save image as, right here. It might be a little hard to see, but when I save that image as, and I would get rid of, now the reason that's one is showing up is I may have already done this into downloads, but now what you want to do is have a folder inside your W2 called IMJ, and he will actually help you create that. But what I would do here is before I saved it, I would navigate to my repo, my CIT85, and then W2. But if you don't, just move that file over, right? So you can do it whichever way. Like if I was to download it here, I could do that, but I would also probably go into Documents. I'd go to 82, I'd go to my private, and then I would go here. Now I've already created that image, and you can already see it's there, and then you can hit Save. Yours is going to maybe look a little different based on your operating system. I'm using a Mac. For Windows, it's pretty much the same. But if for some reason you don't see this ability to navigate through, then just copy it maybe into your downloads and then paste, you first download it into there, then go find the file in your file manager and then copy it into this image directory. Okay, so I just want to give you that heads up because again, the idea is not to, make this confusing. One of the things I realized I didn't cover in the week 1, and was my bad, was that there's 2 parts of this class. right? There's weekly work. Now, what is weekly work? It's the code-alongs and the group work, right? So last week you had your code-along right after you set up the dev environment, and now this week you'll have a code-along and a group work discussion. Like if you've taken online classes, you've done discussions. These are different discussions in the sense that you're actually doing work that you share with your classmates. So that work makes up 60% of this grade for this class, and there's 13 of those items, so each one is worth 4.6% of your overall grade. And then we're going to have a project, and for the project there'll be 4. I'll break the project into 4 submissions. Like I'll give you requirements for the first one, you'll do that one, I'll give you, so we'll have 4 of those. And so because that item weighs 40% and there's only 4 of them, each of them account for 10%. So yeah, the project work is weighted heavily because first you might not think so because it's less percentage, but there's less items that make that up. Okay? So just FYI. I just also finished the week 2 video a little while ago. And when I was doing it, I had a little bit of a hiccup in showing you the URL. So I just wanted to give you the heads up that I do pause in the video and realize something that I needed to fix, and I fixed it, which I try not to do, honestly, but sometimes that's just the nature of reality. But basically, here's what I want you to know going in. When you've created your public repo, okay, let me just actually go show you this. A little bit of a duplicate for that, but it's okay. When you do that, there's in the public, because anyone can see it, okay? Not just in our class, but on the GitHub, on the internet, right? When you go into settings, because it's public, it's exposed to anyone. The private, by the way, is private between you and I, but the public is for anyone. We can use this wonderful thing called pages. Again, if you've taken my 82 class, you know that I had you create a github.io. But I'm actually moving away from that because I want students to be able to render websites with our work, and then if they choose to, they can place it on their own sites and not then as part of the course material. So in this case, before now, I'd gone down here, I'd hit main, and it's just the root of, we talked about the root a little, so hopefully that makes sense. And then when I save, it doesn't happen immediately, but eventually you get a URL. And that's what's great about when we're doing group work, is that you can give everybody a URL that then renders as a website. Now in this case, you're going to end up, let's see if my W2, yeah, my W2, week 2 is what you do for the group work for the second item for this week. Now, mine's doesn't show anything, but I just also want to show you this. So first, that's just FYI, a little quick preview of that. So I just want to show you when you hit reply, and in this case, you're not going to have to do this kind of reply that I'm about to show you, but in this case, also, I'd probably have you start thinking about what kind of questions would you have around this. You might wonder, well, what's the project stuff we're going to do? Well, I'm actually this course is being newly created. So if there are suggestions you have that you think would be fun, we could do that. It'll be hand coding. I can tell you this, it'll be hand coding a website without any frameworks, without any libraries, with pure HTML and CSS. Right, and it'll probably be between 7 and 10 pages. And for those of you that are like, oh my God, right, CIT82 just finished, 21 pages. So but this is different because you're coding it all. Anyway, I back up. Let me slow down and actually talk about what I want to show you here. Right. So anyway, think about questions you would have. This is a perfect time to be asking me. I'll probably come up with one at the end if you don't think of one. But in this case, when you hit your reply, you'll answer the question. But when you're doing the group work, it is also a discussion. And in that case, you'll be pasting in your URL. Okay? And again, I talk about that in the video, so don't worry if you don't have it right now. But watch what happens and this is actually a good thing to talk about. Canvas has a built-in HTML, what we call WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, editor. Okay? when we're using VS Code, that's a regular IDE. There's no WYSIWYG in there, right? When WYSIWYG used to be more popular, and thank God it's not anymore, but that did make some things easier, like this. Let me show you. If I come down to the bottom and I open in this, you should recognize this, right? This tag, end and opening. Notice how that is what, by just me pasting it in there, I didn't write a P tag, right? It wrote it. But when I do this, check out what happens when I hit enter. Oh, right? The WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, right? It's been such a while it's been a minute since I've used it. I'm like, is that the right explanation for this? Because basically what this is doing is it's writing code for you, right? And what you're learning to do in this class is you're learning to write code yourself rather than have the system write it for you. But what's cool is you can actually drop in by hitting this icon and seeing what code it wrote for you. And this should make some sense. Like, here's the URL, and look at this, target blank. You will learn this, target blank. Did you learn it already? Well, if not, you're learning it this week, right? And again, this is the only one we haven't. And we could actually, I'm going to undo that. We could go look at that. Matter of fact, that would be a fun one for you to do. Like, go look at what that means, rel no opener, and see, and come back and tell us, hey, what did that mean? Right? Or any other. So what's the question? So if there wasn't a question, and that's pretty much the topics I wanted to cover for this week, right? Here's what I want to say. This is a 9-week, so 5 and 4, 9-week, 3-unit class. So normally a 3-unit class is over an 18-week semester. This is a compressed what we call short-term class, right? So that's why getting behind in a class like this, I trust me, I see it more than I like to, where students are really, once they even get 1 week, 2 weeks behind, 3 weeks behind, is really hard to catch up with. So commit to yourself that you're going to stay up to date with this class. And then if you're not, right, and you need help or you want to talk about it, and by the way, in general, my office hours, are listed in simple syllabus, but I'm on campus. I work at home, I work on campus, I work wherever, right? So, but reach out for help. We have a tutor for this class. I have Zach's information in simple syllabus. We have Discord. There's many ways to get help. So really try not to get behind in this class. So my question would be, did you realize that, and probably 9 weeks second part, like, in other words, 9-week courses can be either the start of the semester or the end of the semester, right? So because we're starting midpoint, maybe you did realize in coming into this class it was a 9-week compressed, normally 18 weeks compressed down into 3. So I've covered several things you could ask questions about if you want. Again, this is not a URL you have to post for this week. It was just something I was previewing for our group work that's coming up this week. And I look forward to seeing what kind of questions you ask because, actually generally what I do is I come in here and I will post replies so other students see when you ask questions that really are great to ask, because then it helps them clarify that as well. Okay, enough from me. Have a great one. And our class in the RL, in the real world, will be starting next week, but I suspect you're already in week 2. But I try to keep 2 weeks at minimum published at all times.